Welcome back to part 4. In this session we're going to talk about the emissive base setup, and this is fairly straightforward. We want to give ourselves the ability to kind of simulate lighting in an environment, so things like lamppost, sci-fi paneling, things like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to create and establish the ability to turn emissive on, and also to give it a color and a power, and then also how to mask it to only certain areas of the map. Alright, so let's continue on with emissive part 4. Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about the emissive channel and how we can use that to our benefit to kind of give ourselves some simulated lighting in the environment, and also how we can mask that to certain parts of a texture. So let's go ahead and get started on that, and we need to make some room between the roughness and the normal. Since we have everything nice and tidied up in our comment boxes, this is fairly easy to do. And we'll go ahead and start with the emissive color. And so basically what an emissive is to demonstrate, let's go back to our sphere over here, and we'll hit F in here just to frame up because I lost it there. We can actually create an emissive color that is going to kind of span out from our mesh and give the illusion that there is light coming from it. Okay, so just like albedo color before, and anytime we've dealt with hue, we want to create a constant 3 that's going to represent our color, and we'll go ahead and convert that to a parameter, and we'll title this emissive. Alright, and we'll go ahead and create a new group for emissive, and in our description box we'll type in emissive color. Okay, so let's grab this and drag it all the way over here, plug it into emissive color. Alright, and nothing happened, and that is of course because the default is black. So if we were to change this to white, we can see now that our mesh is glowing. So I want to go ahead and apply this. We're going to come into our scene and hit F11, and with this emissive you can see that everything begins to glow. So let's open up our material instance and let's go down to emissive, and what we can do is we can turn this down and we can start to turn it up. Alright, but right now it doesn't really look like a light, it just looks like it's not shaded very well, and it's kind of confusing as to what's happening here, and that's because we can't really control the intensity yet. Okay, so in order to control the intensity, let's go back into our material. We have our color. What we want to do is we want to multiply this by a power. Okay, so let's introduce a multiply node holding M on the keyboard, and here's one of those prime examples where we could go all the way up here and start to drag these lines around, or we could just stay right where we're at, hold control on the keyboard and move this over. Alright, so we'll plug this into slot A. Okay, and let's go ahead and introduce a scalar parameter, and we'll call this emissive power. Okay, oops. Give this a default value of 1 so that we're multiplying by 1. And in the description box we will just type in emissive power. Alright, and some of this is a little bit redundant, but for the sake of learning I think it's good to have descriptions on everything right now. And we'll go ahead and plug this in, and we'll make sure to group it underneath our emissive. And we'll apply this. Okay, so going back over, we now have emissive power. And we can turn this up, and what we see is that we're really getting some really hard lighting effects. And because there's a really bright blue kind of background, it's kind of hard to tell, so we'll look inside the material instance, and this is easier to see. So if we turn this to black, we can see we're not getting any value, and we can start to turn it up and maybe to blue. Alright, and so now that we have our color selected, we can come over here to our power and we can begin to multiply that up. Alright, so that's a really cool effect. So the next step is to, well, we could add our desaturation like we did on our albedo, and that's fairly simple. But we want to be able to mask it out. We want to be able to tell it that, you know, we don't want our whole mesh to be lit. So, for example, let's say we were making a street lamp and we only wanted the light bulb itself to be lit. Well, we could make an entire separate material for it, or we could just leave it in this material and use a mask to control that. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go back to our material instance, our material editor, sorry, and we'll go ahead and add that desaturation first. So we'll right click, start to type in desaturation, we'll plug that in and plug that back into A, we will duplicate our scalar parameter, and this will be emissive saturation. Alright, and we'll put that in the description box as well. Saturation. Alright, and this will be a default value of 0, so we don't want it to be desaturated. Alright, so we have that set up and we can go ahead and apply that. So if we come in here now, we should be able to just desaturate this and start to get a you know, kind of a more faint blue. So it's gonna be really handy, you know, say you're doing planet Earth and you just wanted that haze. So one way to get that, and it's cheap, so it doesn't hurt. Okay, so the mask. Let's go ahead and pull in another texture, and what we're gonna do is, we know that multiplying anything by a value of 1 is itself, right? We take 10, we multiply it by 1, we get 10. Multiplying by 0, we get 0. We take 10, we multiply by 0, obviously we get 0. Alright, so with that in mind, our mask is going to be a black and white texture. And all of the black will represent 0, and all of the white will represent 1. So anything multiplied by that white will obviously give us the true value. Anything multiplied by 0 will cancel it out. Anything in between will give us a mixed value. So let's go in here and let's grab a black and white texture. Let's say something fairly obvious, kind of clear cut. And I'm not really seeing anything in here, so now might be a good time to go ahead and introduce importing textures. So we'll pull up Photoshop and we'll make a mask really quick. So we'll go File, New, and it doesn't need to be anything large. We'll just stick with 512. Alright, and we'll go ahead and fill the background in with black. Alright, and we need all the way black. Alright, we'll create a new layer, and where we want it to be lit, we're just gonna fill in with white. So what we'll do is we'll just draw a couple of circles here, and we'll fill that in with white. And we'll save as, and we'll save with Targa. And what I'll do is I will just save it to my desktop for now. We'll call this emissive_mask, and we're going to save it as a Targa file, and we will hit save. Alright, 24 is fine, and minimize. Now to get that in here, we'll go up to our folder. This is really simple. We just go to our desktop, we grab our emissive mask, and we simply drag and drop it in there. That's all you have to do. Alright, and now what we can do is we can select that emissive mask, and we'll come in here and we will, alright, autosave. Now we can type in 2D, hit texture sample parameter, and it's going to pull that in. We'll title this emissive mask. We want this to be grouped underneath the emissive, and we can just emissive, mask. Oh geez, if I could get this right. Emissive mask shows where to use light, something like that. All right, now how do we get this to affect this? Well, it's easy. We just multiply it again. All right, so we'll create a new multiply node holding M, hold Control on the keyboard to relocate that, and let's now multiply right here by that. And now what we can see is that the white areas in our multiply are picking up the emissive and the black are not. So we'll go ahead and apply that. We'll go into our scene, F11, and now we're getting this really interesting result where we only have the emissive coming through in those given areas, excuse me. Alright, and we can turn that up. And so this is some really cool effects, and we could even add some UV channel information a little bit later on so that we can kind of tile and maybe even animate this. But so far what we have is the ability to come in here and use the emissive. We can use an albedo. We have metalness, or we could simply use a metalness value. We have roughness or a roughness value. And the only thing that we're really missing, and we can use our normal intensity. The only thing we're really missing right now, let's go ahead and comment box this. Call this emissive is the ability to tell whether or not it has an emissive. Alright. And the best way to do this in our case is we could go set up a static switch, but the best way is just to set the value default to black, or rather we could even leave it at white and we'll just set the emissive power to 0, and that way we're not getting any emissive off the bat. So if we come back and we apply that and we go to our emissive and we reset our emissive power to default, you can see that by default it will now be off. So if someone wants to use it, all they have to do is come into emissive and start to turn the power up. Alright, so that's really convenient, and it saves us on instruction count, which is always nice. So fairly simple tutorial series on how to get the basic stuff set up. In the next series we're going to talk about kind of elaborating on some of this stuff and how to do some blend maps and some vertex painting. We'll get into some water puddle shading and some interesting tricks on how to do moss on brick walls and pill paint and things like that. But for now we're going to call this a wrap. So this is the basic intro and get a material set up, and I hope this is useful to you. And thanks for watching.